Gabriella's life felt like an endless loop of frustration and financial strain as her trusty truck persistently broke down. Every trip to the repair shop drained her savings further, leaving her feeling more hopeless with each passing day. The situation seemed bleak, and little did she know that the local mechanic, whom she had come to trust, was the very villain behind her woes. His deceitful hands were intentionally sabotaging her vehicle, greedily pocketing the profits from her repeated visits. Her faith in humanity was wavering, and her heart was heavy with despair. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell to avoid missing any videos. Yet destiny had an unforeseen twist in store for her, a glimmer of hope in her darkened world. One fateful day, as she sought refuge in a nondescript roadside diner, her spirits at an all-time low, she encountered a stranger who would alter the course of her life forever. This stranger, not just any ordinary traveler but a Michelin-starred chef, walked into the diner with an air of confidence and compassion. He saw the weariness in Gabriella's eyes and, moved by an inexplicable sense of duty, offered her more than just a gourmet meal. He extended a hand of friendship and hope, a lifeline that promised to pull her out of her misery. Hello everyone, and welcome to Tales Unveiled. Today, I'm thrilled to bring you a new story brimming with unexpected twists and heartfelt turns. Let's dive right in and uncover the magic woven into this tale. The neon sign outside the diner flickered ominously, each burst of light like the erratic beats of a dying heart. Spelling out Du's Diner, it was a grim warning, one that Daniel should have heeded. But desperation clouded his judgment, and he steered his battered Subaru into the cracked, crumbling parking lot. As he stepped out, the acrid smell of exhaust and burnt coffee assaulted his senses, dragging up memories he'd long buried, memories he wished would stay hidden. This diner was the epitome of everything he had sworn to avoid: a stark, unwelcoming place of plastic menus and weary long-haul truckers clutching their lukewarm coffee refills. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of countless stories of fatigue and endurance. Yet desperation, that ruthless, unyielding force, had a way of distorting a man's principles, driving him into the very places he swore he'd never end up. The flickering sign seemed almost to mock him, but he pushed open the door, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. Little did he know, his life was about to intertwine with Gabriella's in a way that would change them both forever. He had been on the road for 2 relentless days, escaping the wreckage of his once glorious Michelin-starred existence in Boston. The world of fancy restaurants and razor-sharp critics had crumbled around him faster than a souffle gone wrong. The diner job wasn't part of any grand comeback strategy. It was merely a temporary refuge, a place to catch his breath and figure out his next move. As he stepped inside, his apprehensions began to melt away. The place wasn't as dreadful as he had feared. The booths were made of cracked vinyl, and the jukebox churned out melancholic country tunes, but there was an undeniable, weathered honesty to the place that felt strangely comforting. One wall was adorned with faded photographs, capturing the diner's heyday, a time of chrome curves, bustling crowds, and beaming smiles. It was a window into a past that had long since slipped away. A no-nonsense waitress, surprisingly youthful for such a worn-down establishment, approached him. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice carrying a refreshing twang that stood in stark contrast to the pretentious airs of Boston. "Black as my soul," he muttered, immediately cringing at the dramatic flair of his words. To his relief, the waitress simply laughed, filling his mug with a brew that could double as a weapon. He took a cautious sip, preparing for the usual bitterness. Instead, he was greeted with an unexpected richness, strong, yet with a subtle complexity that hinted at a genuine care for the beans, not just a quest for a caffeine jolt. As he sat there, the initial sip evolving into a comforting warmth, he realized that this humble diner, with its cracked vinyl seats and nostalgic photographs, might just be the place where he could start to piece together the fragments of his shattered life. The strong coffee was like a metaphor for his resilience, bitter at first, but with a depth and strength that could carry him through the uncertain days ahead. He scanned the room, taking in the scene a blend of weary truckers and locals who seemed to hunch over their plates as if exchanging life's deepest secrets. Each person appeared to have a set routine, an unspoken role in this small, familiar ecosystem. The waitress, with a name tag that read Annie, approached and plunked down a laminated menu. "Specials meatloaf, if you haven't sworn off solid food completely," she said with a playful smirk. He blinked, caught between amusement and slight offense. He was accustomed to servers treading lightly around his fallen culinary reputation. "Any good?" he asked, realizing he needed real sustenance, something beyond his coffee-fueled wallowing. Annie's eyes sparkled with a hint of challenge. "Depends. Are you one of those guys who thinks a sprig of parsley makes it gourmet?" she retorted, her tone teasing yet sharp. He couldn't help but grin. "Lady, I've seen edible flowers used where they had no business being," he replied, leaning in conspiratorially. "I just want to know if it'll keep me driving another 1,000 miles. Annie laughed, a genuine hearty sound that seemed to light up the dingy diner. "Well, it ain't fancy, but it's hearty. Meatloaf around here is the stuff of legends. It'll stick to your ribs and give you the strength to keep on going." He nodded appreciatively, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie with this spunky waitress. As he placed his order, he noticed the way the other patrons interacted with Annie, jokes, familiar greetings, the easy banter of people who had long accepted each other's quirks and stories. There was a warmth here, a sense of community he hadn't felt in ages. The meatloaf arrived, and it looked surprisingly appetizing. He took a bite and was pleasantly surprised by the rich, comforting flavors. It was simple, honest food, nothing like the pretentious dishes he used to create, but it filled a different kind of void. As he ate, he found himself reflecting on the twists of fate that had brought him to this diner. His life in Boston felt like a distant memory, a chapter that had closed with a resounding crash. But maybe, just maybe, this unplanned detour was exactly what he needed to rediscover a sense of purpose. The diner's battered honesty, the laughter of the waitress, and the simple, hearty meal were like pieces of a puzzle starting to fit together, offering him a glimmer of hope for the road ahead. And that seemed to satisfy her. "Doi makes it. She doesn't make bad food," the name lingered in the air, a quiet tribute to the cook's reliable skills. He nodded, suddenly yearning for something simple, a meal designed to nourish rather than to impress. Daniel lost track of time as he sat there. Annie was attentive, keeping his coffee topped off and slipping him a slice of pie that he devoured with unexpected gusto. It was the other customers who caught his attention. A trucker with faded tattoos gently teased Annie as she refilled his cup. An elderly couple bickered over the last bite of their shared dish, their banter easy and affectionate, the product of decades together. And then there was the woman by the window. At first, she blended into the background wearing faded jeans and a messy ponytail, her posture hunched and wary. Each time a rig thundered past, she flinched, and Daniel felt a pang of empathy. When Annie refilled her water, he caught a better look at her face. Even in the dim light, the dark circles under her eyes were stark, speaking volumes about her exhaustion and worry. Something about her tugged at the fixer in him, the part that longed to take broken pieces and turn them into something whole and nourishing. "Problem over there?" he asked quietly, nodding toward the woman. Annie let out a soft sigh. "That's Gabriella. She drives cross-country, mostly hauling livestock. She's been a regular here for longer than she probably should be. If you ask me, her tone was a mix of concern and resignation. The world of long-haul trucking was tough, especially for a woman alone on those endless, isolated roads. Daniel's heart went out to Gabriella. He knew the kind of strength it took to keep going when everything seemed to be falling apart. "Does she need help?" he asked, feeling a surge of protective instinct. Annie glanced over at Gabriella, then back at Daniel. She needs a break, more than anything. Life's been rough on her lately. If you want to help, just be kind. Sometimes that's all we can do. He nodded, absorbing Annie's words. He understood now why he had felt drawn to this place, why he had ended up in this diner despite everything. It was a place where people were real, where they faced their battles head-on, supported by the quiet strength of a community that cared. As he finished his meal, Daniel resolved to reach out to Gabriella, to offer whatever support he could. Maybe it was his way of finding redemption, of piecing together his own fractured life by helping someone else. He felt a newfound sense of purpose stirring within him, a desire to make a difference, no matter how small. And in this humble diner, with its flickering sign and cracked vinyl seats, he realized he had found more than just a pit stop. He had found a place where he could begin to heal, one act of kindness at a time. "What's the story?" Daniel asked, lowering his voice to match Annie's caution as she glanced around, ensuring no one else was listening. "Bad luck," mostly Annie replied, her tone tinged with empathy. "Her truck keeps breaking down, and she's stuck staying at the cheap motel down the road 'cause Doi gives her a discount. Every cent she earns goes into repairs. It ain't sustainable." The gears in Daniel's mind began to turn. While he was a chef by trade, he'd spent enough late nights under the hoods of temperamental used cars out of sheer necessity. A puzzle was a puzzle, whether it was made of produce or pistons. "Let me buy her a coffee," he said suddenly, surprising even himself with the impulsiveness of the offer. He wasn't usually the type to play the white knight, especially not for someone who might swat away the gesture like a pesky fell. Annie smirked, a hint of approval in her eyes. She might be up for that, but don't expect much conversation. She needs more than a caffeine kick. The concern in her gaze was unmistakable. Daniel signaled, and Annie walked over to Gabriella's booth, leaning in to whisper something. The trucker eyed him with a mix of wariness and curiosity before giving a reluctant nod. At least she hadn't thrown the offer back in his face. As Gabriella shuffled over to his table, Daniel tried not to stare. She was younger than he had expected, with a toughness that came from living on the edge, not from gym workouts or sanitized adventures. He pushed aside the chef part of him that automatically assessed ingredients, realizing this wasn't about judgment, but about offering help. "Heard things are rough," he started gently as Gabriella sank into the booth across from him. "That's an understatement," she replied, her voice rough and tired. The weight of her words hung heavily between them, a silent testament to the struggles she faced. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling an unfamiliar sense of determination. "I know a bit about cars," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Maybe I could take a look at your truck. It might not solve everything, but it could save you a few bucks on repairs." Gabriella studied him, her eyes searching for any hint of pity or insincerity. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "It's worth a shot," she said, her voice softening just a fraction. "I can't keep throwing money into a black hole." Encouraged by her response, Daniel continued, "You know, sometimes life throws us into places we never expected to be. But maybe those places are exactly where we need to be to find a way forward." Gabriella's gaze softened as she listened, a flicker of hope igniting in her weary eyes. "I used to think I could handle anything," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But lately it feels like I'm drowning." Daniel reached across the table, his hand resting lightly on hers. "You're not alone," he said firmly. "We'll figure this out together." For the first time in a long while, Gabriella felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't sure if she believed in fate, but she couldn't deny that meeting Daniel felt like a turning point. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the darkness that had enveloped her life. As they sat there, a tentative friendship began to form, built on shared struggles and a mutual desire to find something better. In the flickering light of Du's diner, surrounded by the smell of strong coffee and the hum of quiet conversations, two weary souls found a spark of hope that would guide them through the uncertain days ahead. "Any idea what the issue is?" Daniel asked, knowing it was a long shot but needing a place to start. Gabriella shook her head, frustration evident in her eyes. "Something they're not telling me straight," she said, her voice tinged with exasperation. "Every other week, it's another breakdown. Small stuff, but it adds up faster than I can haul loads." The simmering anger in her voice mirrored his growing sense of indignation. He hesitated for a moment, then pulled a crumpled napkin from his pocket and borrowed a pen from the counter. "Humor me. Write down everything they've fixed this month," he suggested. It took some coaxing, but Gabriella eventually relented, scribbling a list of parts and repairs. Daniel scanned it, his chef's mind working in overdrive, translating the mechanical jargon into a familiar pattern. "Yes, some of this is wrong," he muttered, his brow furrowing. "It's like they're going for the most temporary fixes, guaranteed to screw up again quickly." Her head snapped up, a spark of hope igniting in her tired eyes. "You sure? You ain't just saying that?" "Look, I'm no mechanic," he said, holding up his hands to temper any expectations. "But even in a kitchen, there's the quick fix and the thing you do right. Maybe they're counting on you not knowing the difference." Gabriella's expression softened, a mix of relief and renewed determination washing over her. "So what do we do?" she asked, her voice steadier now. Daniel leaned back, contemplating their next move. "First, let's get a second opinion," he suggested. "I know a guy a few towns over who's good with engines. He won't sugarcoat it." She nodded, a sense of purpose beginning to replace her previous hopelessness. And then he said with a resolute smile, "We figure out how to get you back on the road without these constant setbacks." As they sat there, a plan slowly taking shape, the initial awkwardness between them melted away. Gabriella began to share more about her life on the road, the endless miles and the solitude, while Daniel opened up about his fall from grace in the culinary world. They found common ground in their struggles, a mutual understanding that transcended their individual stories. Gabriella looked at him, gratitude evident in her eyes. "I don't know why you're helping me, but thank you. I've been feeling so lost, like I'm fighting a losing battle." Daniel shrugged, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Sometimes we just need someone to remind us that we're not alone. Besides, I could use a distraction from my mess." Annie walked by, catching the tail end of their conversation. She placed a fresh pot of coffee on the table, her expression a mix of curiosity and approval. "Looks like you two are making some headway," she remarked, refilling their mugs. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I think we are. Thanks for the assist, Annie." "Anytime," she said with a wink. This place could use a bit of good news. As the night wore on, they continued to talk, their initial connection deepening into a genuine friendship. Daniel realized that helping Gabriella was helping him too. It gave him a sense of purpose, a way to channel his skills and energy into something meaningful. By the time the diner began to close, they had a plan in place. Gabriella would meet with the mechanic Daniel recommended, and together they would figure out the best course of action. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start, a glimmer of hope in what had been a long, dark tunnel. As they parted ways, Daniel felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time since his life had fallen apart, he felt like he was on the right path. Helping Gabriella wasn't just about fixing her truck, it was about reclaiming his sense of worth and finding a way to move forward. Gabriella, too, felt a renewed sense of determination. With Daniel's help, she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she climbed into her truck, she looked back at the diner, a small smile playing on her lips. For the first time in a long while, she felt like things might just turn around. Gabriella stood frozen, her inner conflict plain on her face. "This place," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "it's not the kind of place where you can negotiate. Even if you're in the right, there was a deeper story there." But he didn't press. Small towns had a way of knowing every detail about your life, with secrets, debts, and favors tangled up like old, frayed telephone wires. The diner's door groaned open, and a burst of icy wind sliced through the cozy warmth inside. A man swaggered in, his presence commanding attention. Annie's shoulders went rigid, but Gabriella didn't even lift her gaze. A look of resigned weariness etched into her features. "Just passing through, darling," the man drawled, a predatory grin stretching across his face. "Didn't realize this joint had such a stunning view." Daniel's instincts flared. Years spent in bustling kitchens had sharpened his reflexes, not for fighting, but for quick, decisive action to avert disaster. He wasn't about to let some jerk intimidate a woman who just wanted to enjoy her coffee in peace. "Gabriella's got her coffee," he stated firmly. "Food might take a while, but you, pal, need to be on your way." The man turned his mocking gaze to Daniel. "Well now, ain't you the gallant type?" "Too bad," he sneered. "A woman like this needs help she's not even asking for, if you catch my meaning." Gabriella rose, her hands clenched into tight fists. Her voice, though low, carried the weight of her fury. "The only help I need is getting my damn truck fixed right, and creeps like you leaving me the hell alone." The diner seemed to shrink, the tension thickening the air. In a city, the guy might have backed off, sensing the potential fallout wasn't worth the trouble. But here, it could turn nasty quickly. Then a sound broke through the tension, a sharp click, followed by Annie's voice, as cold and hard as steel. "One more step, and this old shotgun of Doy's gets some use." The man retreated immediately. Annie, after securing the shotgun, made a point of staying close, her protective stance unmistakable. Gus shuffled over, softer than usual, mumbling something about it being good to see people still had some fight in them. Daniel had a half-formed plan, but it depended on Gabriella trusting him enough to hear it out. As she ate her bowl of hearty stew, he laid it out plainly. "Those repairs." He began, his voice low and steady. "They weren't just bad luck. Someone's messing with you, Gabriella, and I think I can prove it." Her eyes narrowed, but she continued eating. "You some kind of savior, think you can fix a lifetime of problems over a cup of coffee." The weight of her words hung in the air. Daniel felt the gravity of the moment, knowing that earning her trust would be the first step in helping her reclaim her peace. He was ready to fight for her, not just as a protector, but as a friend willing to stand by her side through the storm. "No," he admitted, "but I can tell when someone's being taken advantage of. Let me take a look at your truck. At the very least, you'll have another set of eyes on it." Her reluctance was almost tangible. The fiercely independent nature she had cultivated made her wary of trusting others, especially someone who had no obligation to help her. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, having been let down too many times before. After a moment's pause, she nodded. "All right, but if you so much as scratch it, I'll personally drag you to the next state line." It was a tentative agreement, but it was a beginning. There was a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, masked by the tough exterior she presented to the world. It was clear she had fought many battles on her own and wasn't about to let her guard down easily. The biting winter wind greeted them as they stepped outside, her truck looming in the dim glow of the flickering lot lights. The night was quiet, the cold air sharp and unforgiving. He lifted the hood, ignoring the cold that gnawed at him as he worked. His fingers traced the engine's intricate pathways, uncovering the subtle signs that corroborated the sad tale she had described. Each part told a story of neglect and deliberate sabotage. "Gabriella, you've been played." He pointed out the deliberately weakened parts, the shoddy repairs designed to fail. Her eyes widened in shock before a storm of fury replaced the disbelief. It wasn't just the money or the inconvenience, it was the sheer audacity of being taken for a fool that burned in her. "How do I fight back?" Her voice was raw with emotion, a mix of desperation and anger. She had been fighting alone for so long. The idea of someone standing with her was foreign but not unwelcome. "First, we get you a real mechanic," he said firmly, knowing he was diving deeper into her troubles than he had initially intended. But the unfairness gnawed at him. She deserved better than to be swindled by some crooked mechanic. "And maybe," he added with a steely resolve, "we make that lousy mechanic regret ever crossing you." As they drove away from the diner, the flickering sign felt less like a bad omen and more like a challenge. The road ahead was dark, the night filled with unknowns, but for the first time in months, Daniel felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just drifting aimlessly, he was moving towards something meaningful. He glanced over at Gabriella, her profile illuminated by the dim dashboard light. She was strong and resilient, and despite the walls she had built, there was a vulnerability that made him want to protect her. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. They would have to confront the mechanic, face the small-town gossip, and navigate the complexities of trust and friendship. But at that moment, as the diner's lights faded into the distance, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Hope that he could make a difference, that he could help Gabriella find justice and maybe, just maybe, find a place for himself in this small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. The cold night air seemed a little less biting as they drove on, the silence between them no longer filled with tension, but with a shared understanding. They were both fighters in their own right, and together they might just have a chance to right the wrongs that had been done. The road was long, and the night was dark, but they had a destination in mind and the determination to get there. As Daniel and Gabriella drive away into the night, their journey symbolizes not just the fight against injustice, but the power of trust, resilience, and standing up for what's right. Their story reminds us that even in the darkest times, there's hope and the possibility of change. What have you learned from their journey so far? Reflect on the lessons of resilience, trust, and the fight against injustice. Share in the comments below one thing you've learned from their story and how you plan to apply it in your life. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories.